Hello. So I'm going to continue my series on the comparison of kings. Last time we did comparison of Manasseh and Ammon. This time we're going to compare Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. Now, Belshazzar was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and they acted in a very similar manner. So once again, we'll see kind of a comparison here. Now, in this case, both of these kings are unsaved. So it's not like one started being righteous and the other one, didn't. And they had different time limits, like it was with Manasseh and Ammon. In this case, both of them were, Gentile kings that just didn't really humble themselves. So I'm going to read a passage from Daniel chapter 5, verse 18 through verse 22 and just to see both of these kings. So Daniel 5:18. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with the grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. So, anyway, so this story, so you need to get some context here. But basically, you might remember the story where Nebuchadnezzar, he was lifted up with pride, and then God just took away his intelligence, and he literally, Nebuchadnezzar just crawled on his hands and ate, grass for years, until one day he humbled himself, and then God finally, there was a time limit there, and then God finally, healed him, and then finally Nebuchadnezzar um, glorified God, but he had to be pushed to that. Someone as proud as him had to be pushed into that state where he humbled himself and he realized that everything he owns, everything he has, all of his blessings, they come from God. But that was temporary, and that's how it is with people. Like God blesses us, we're like, people, we get lifted up in pride, and then we forget about God, and then God punishes us, and we're like, oh yeah, God exists, and then we start praising God, but then we forget. So this is not a righteous king who got right and stayed right. No, it was temporary. It was temporary. He glorified God temporarily. He didn't really change his lifestyle. He was still worshiping his own gods, and he still did whatever he wanted to do. But it was a temporary acknowledgement of God, of the true God of the universe. But it was very temporary. It didn't last. And that's how it is with people, like they just want this temporary, they just want this blessing from God. They want God to leave them alone. And that's kind of how it was with Nebuchadnezzar. He humbled himself, but just temporarily. And he was given plenty of chances to repent that he never really took advantage of. So anyway, all these blessings come from God. Another passage I wanted to mention was here it says in verse, like what basically the newest of this. Basically in Daniel 4:17, it says, it's a very good verse actually. Daniel 4:17, it says that God appoints the basest of men into these positions of power. So Nebuchadnezzar realized that it was God that appointed him, and God can pick anyone off the street and decide like, hey, I want that guy to be the king. It says basest of men, so it's not the righteous men that get to positions of power. It's generally the basest of men, the wicked men, and then you should know that's a very important verse to understand in the Bible, because if you understand that and think about it, then you won't get too crazy about voting in elections or worry, who's going to be in charge of the countries, the Republicans or Democrats and all this. You won't be too concerned with that because you realize that God is appointing the basest of men. someone who is righteous isn't going to be trying to be president. Like, just anyway, that is the biblical view of the government, actually. Um, so so like Nebuchadnezzar got put down. But it didn't last long. He didn't really acknowledge God for that long. So then you have Belshazzar. Now, in verse 22, it says, "And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this." So yeah, it does say, "Oh, his son," but actually, I think through some sources I've read, Belshazzar was actually the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. It's actually the grandson. So sometimes the Bible does that. It says son, but it's actually the grandson, according to his historical information. So so it was his grandson. Now, what did he do? So you might remember the story about the handwriting on the wall. That's basically what happened here. Belshazzar saw the handwriting on the wall, and he got scared. And that, then if you remember the story, he got Daniel to come over and interpret and all this. And then this is when this is Daniel telling Belshazzar, like, hey, you knew all of this. So now the thing about Belshazzar, though, is that God didn't really give him a chance. He didn't really give him too much of a chance to repent. He just punished him right away. So the difference is Nebuchadnezzar got chances. He got many chances, and he rejected all of them. And that's just what happens. He got a lot of chances, and he rejected all of them. Belshazzar, he didn't really get that many chances. He just maybe got like one, and and then God just punished him. So what's the difference? Like, yeah, both of them didn't get saved. Both of them, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. Now, why did Belshazzar? Like, once again, it's on the topic of God's fairness. Belshazzar did not really get that many chances. Why? Because it says in verse 22, "And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this." So Belshazzar grew up, and he, in his memory, should have remembered what Nebuchadnezzar went through. And everyone around him, first of all, it's a testimony. When the king of the entire country just loses his mind and is eating grass for 7 years, and it's just crazy. Everyone's like, what happened? And like, I'm sure everybody just gave up on him. And for those 7 years, his son was probably in charge. But, everyone's like, this is crazy. And Belshazzar should have been able to see the power of God. And then especially when Nebuchadnezzar went back to being normal, he had that 7 years of, I think it was 7 years where he was just completely out of it. And then Belshazzar should have seen that. He had a testimony. So Belshazzar should have known better. He as an example, he should have seen God's hand in his life. So this could be one of the reasons why God didn't really show as much mercy. And once again, we don't really understand God's reasoning, why he's merciful to some, and others, it seems like he's not as merciful. And there's always a reason. Sometimes we can see the reason. Like in this case, you can kind of infer what the reason was, but not always. Sometimes you just don't know, and you just have to trust God that he is fair. So once again, this is just another comparison of two kings. But this time, both of them are unsaved. Just one of them still got mercy, still made the wrong decisions at the end, though. Whereas another one didn't really get that many chances. But both ended up not saved because they were not making the right decisions. So there's always a time limit. We just don't know it. So you don't want to tempt God. You don't know what the time limit is on his patience. You want to try it. So especially if you're unsaved, you don't want to try God's patience. You don't know when God's going to take you. So you want to get saved today. You don't want to wait. You don't want to put off that decision of trusting in Jesus Christ. You want to make that decision now and not put it off. So yeah, that'll be it. I'll see you next time.